Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. In the aftermath of the ground-shaking developments of the past 2 weeks in the Middle East, I wanted to talk to Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy, about the pivot. Before I do that, though, Admiral, my condolences. My friend Jerry, your friend Jerry, informed me you lost your dad, Captain Montgomery. Jerry tells me he was a cold warrior and a hot warrior, meaning he was in combat and also a cold warrior. What did he do?
So he was eventually became a Navy cryptologist, and he served in the invasion of Lebanon in 1958, 2 tours in Vietnam, uh, and then he eventually was our defense attaché to Moscow, or naval attaché to Moscow for about 3 years,
Oh,
in the Soviet Union, and then went to work at his last job in the military was at the CIA, and he stayed at the CIA for another 15 years afterward on the what's called the National Intelligence Council that does our long range assessments.
so he really was a cold warrior as well as a hot warrior. And
He
Moscow
was.
Station,
Yeah.
that's wild. We'll have to sit down over a beer sometime and find out a little bit about what your dad told. Did you grow up in Moscow at all, or was that a geo batch assignment?
No, no, the whole family was there. I left for about a year and a half of the 3 years to go to school, but I was there about a year and a half. My sister and brother each lived there the whole 3 years.
The,
I got to know, I traded a lot of Playboys and jeans for Soviet Army uniforms for fun.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, Admiral. That's always difficult. What I wanted to ask you is, in the aftermath of this big deal in the Middle East and peace breaking out, and it looks like Iran, at least tactically defeated, maybe strategically set back, do we actually do the pivot now to the Pacific that we've been talking about for 10 years?
Well, that's a great question, Hugh. And this pivot is necessary. I'll tell you what's happening. The carrier strike groups, the Air Force squadrons, the Army Air Defense units, the submarines that we've been keeping in the Middle East, since October 7th again, a big plus up after October 7th, for the past 2 years. That's billions of dollars of readiness to the Air Force, Navy, and Army. Um, and if you think back 10, 12 years ago, it actually broke the Navy and Air Force, uh, where they could no longer do carrier strike group deployments at one point, and the Air Force readiness and their fighter squadrons dropped below 50% at one point. So what we're trying to do is prevent that and prevent the bill that comes with it. So they better, feel comfortable reducing that force structure. And of course, it's always dangerous to reduce at the beginning of a new era, right? You know what I mean? Your deterrent posture is being pulled, but those forces were really about Iran, and I think we have done a lot of damage to Iran. Israel's done a lot of damage to Iran and its networks. So I do support reducing the force structure in the Middle East, flowing it so it's ready to go in the Pacific, so that we have a strong deterrent posture towards China in the Western Pacific.
And Admiral, where does it go? Australia is a long way away from China. Does it go to the Philippines? Does it go to Korea? Or does it go to Japan, or all three of them? Do you have a pie that you divide up in your head?
So the forces we're talking about right now are forces that are stationed in Norfolk, San Diego, Pearl Harbor, and at Air Force bases in the continental U.S. So these were not forward station forces, but forward deployed forces. So as you're able to now deploy these forces in the Pacific, they come from San Diego, Hawaii, Everett, and air bases in the continental United States, and they temporarily go to facilities, I think, in Guam, uh, Japan, and the Philippines, and a little bit down in Australia, because you're right, the distance from Australia is pretty tough. You can't, that's a lot of refueling for an aircraft, and it's, a week-long transit for surface ships. So I kind of think you'll see more U.S. forces in the Guam, Japan, Philippines area as part of this. Probably not Australia and Korea, only because I wouldn't put it in Korea just because Korea is not really part of our Taiwan or South China Sea war fighting planning. The forces on the peninsula tend to stay on the peninsula.
And then snuck into the small print of everything about the last 3 days is the idea that Indonesia is next onto the Abraham Accords, which would be a great thing, largest Muslim majority country in the world. Do we have a defense relationship with them of the sort that we could develop it into a Japanese or a Philippine style relationship?
So we don't have a defense posture in terms of forces stationed there or a defense exercise relationship, but we do have a defense sales relationship. They buy a lot of US gear. That's a pretty good point to pivot on to build interoperability and work with them. They have historically been careful about China. Now, China has unrealistic uh, nine-line claims against Malaysia and Indonesia
Oh,
as well. So they're in there a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Look, they're not just the world's largest Muslim country; they're the second largest democracy in the world, or second or third. They're very close to our population, but second or third largest democracy in the world as well. So I think they're an important country to cultivate there. They're not a war-fighting country with us for the foreseeable future. I think it's Japan, Taiwan, Australia, and the Philippines, kind of in that order.
is there any other base that we can develop, Admiral, thinking out 25 years and trying to be strategic about this? I know that we closed the one in the Philippines. Is there any other place besides Guam that we can plus up and make into a genuinely significant space from which assets can refuel and deploy?
So I think there's two parts to this, and you hit the first one perfectly there. The larger ones that you refuel and deploy from, I think Australia is actually a really good example on that. In Perth area, north of Perth, on the west coast of Australia, I think that's one. I think what we have to do after that is find smaller places that the Air Force and Navy can move to and through, and those include in the Marianas. They include
Yep.
Yap and Tinian, and Palau, and then more in the Philippines. Develop more of what are called EDCA sites. There's 20 of them potentially in the Philippines, and that's how I'd kind of spread this out. Look, someday Taiwan, if you ask me, but that's how I'd spread this out. We need to give the Air Force the ability to move to other bases in a crisis rapidly.
Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. Always good to check in with you while events are afoot in the world. Thank you for your time. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to SalemNewsChannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.